right, let's do this thing. Let's jump in. What's up, chat? Welcome back to the stream. It's Monday. We are indulging in a little bit of mayhem, but very special mayhem today, because today is the official start date of the T5S2 Season 10 Invitational. Now, I want to start by jumping into a little bit of background, because this channel is much larger than it was last time we did this. And so there's probably a lot of people in here who maybe don't know what I'm talking about. Now, obviously, it is possible, contrary to popular belief, to play Warhammer 40,000 online. You can do so in this video showcased here. Way back in the day, in the annals of history, during quarantine, I decided that I would start running online tournaments. They became extremely popular, and so I decided to do, at the end of a season, we first started doing biannual seasons where we would do them 2 times a year, and it got too much work, so we ended up moving to annual seasons. That's why there's 10 seasons, but I think only the first 4 were actually biannual, and the rest of them all have been annually. In any case, what we do is we go through all of the different online events, basically the events that use the Best Coast pairing system that can be then submitted into a... we can take a peek at the live standings right here. That can then be submitted into a circuit, and we take all those people and we rank them. It's very cool. We had over 150 events that were reporting into T5S2 during this last season. We started with just a couple, and then it was a couple dozen, and it's grown bigger, bigger, bigger every year. This year we had over 150 events, and I believe we had 1,000 players that had registered over the course. And we take them and we go to a top 16. So we take the top 16 here, and we end up, this is I don't know where these stats, I think, got a little mutated, because these are not obviously the current incarnation of the stats. But in any case, we take the top 16. Stuff that tends to drift a little bit based on results. So I'm actually not sure where these ones come from. But in any case, we end up going through and taking the top 16 from the standings. Oh, I think this is a league standing. What am I looking at right now? Here we go. Well, that might be all time, actually, I think is what we're looking at. In any case, we go ahead and grab the top 16 and we submit them to the T5S2 Invitational. So at the end of the season, the top 16 players, once all the events are submitted, are given an invite. They can choose to accept or refute the invite, and if they accept, then they are placed into the Invitational. The Invitational is, at the time of recording, is a double elimination. It's a 2-stage event. It's a double elimination group stage, so all of the players get placed into these groups. It's largely by time zone, so that the games are a little bit easier to complete. However, it can move on into what's the word? It will move on into a global after the top cut. So we'll play double elimination for the first group. The winner out of that group that does not get the doubly eliminated will then go on to play in the final stage. The final stage is a separate single elimination event, and that at the end of it will crown one champion. We live stream the whole thing. It's all very fun and cool, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, which is sick. So welcome in, everybody. Thanks everyone for coming and joining. What we're going to be doing is going through some of the lists that have been submitted. So all of these players, I believe that it is, all these players are extremely high performing and very consistent players in the online space. I would say most of them are also in person, either GT winners or highly, what's the word? Sort of highly enfranchised team event players. So they're either they participate a lot in sort of national team events like ATC or WTC, and I think they are all, I would say, paragons of Warhammer 40,000 play. You're not going to get anybody on the Invitational who is like kind of doesn't know what they're doing in any case, because you do have to be able to showcase consistency over the entirety of a season in order to actually qualify, which is pretty sweet. Want to participate in an event? Well, fortunately, it's really easy, chat. Because before we jump into the list themselves, we can talk momentarily about the actual circuit itself. Because I've made a bunch of changes to it this year, and it's easier than ever to actually play. So if you want to participate, you can do so in TTS40k.com is the website. You can go there. There are instructions if you're a tournament organizer on how you can submit your events to the circuit. There's basically some very basic requirements. You have to have 8 players. You have to be advertised publicly. You can't be like, I'm going to play only with my friends and we're just going to submit a million results. And it has to be open to the public via, it can be like purchasable, right? You can have it be either like based on a subscription or a purchase or whatever. You can sell tickets, that's fine. But you can't have an additional qualifier for people who can play. There is a lifetime ban list with exactly one person on it, and you're not allowed to let them play in your event. and that's it. If you do all of those things, and you are either running your event on Best Coast Pairings or you are able to import your results into Best Coast Pairings, you can then submit to the circuit for your events to be registered. We also have a specific channel for people who can ping everyone who wants to participate in the circuit over on the Discord server. We typically see events that you must be accredited on or tokenized on the T5S2 standings to post in that channel. If you are, typically we see those events do get a bunch of signups from people who are interested in getting more scores in. The other thing is that we run free events, and I just spent a bunch of time over in the Discord revamping how the free events work. So we have a new, previously, all of the events of the server I ran totally manually. We had a wait list for, we have free events that run probably 2 to 3 times per week. I guess the average is like probably 4 to 5 events per week because we have multiple different time zones that we run events in. And I was running them all by hand, and I was tracking all the wait lists by hand and adding people by hand. It was fucking hugely time consuming. If you're wondering where the fuck I went in the last like 2 weeks, I was busy. I built a robot for Discord that would handle almost all that stuff itself. So I still have to do like the Best Coast Pairings management and, you know, shuffling players around and all the TO stuff, but the waitlisting and all that stuff is totally automated. I will, assuming that I can do this without like, I don't know, just doxing myself like massively. I will go ahead and showcase how that works momentarily here so that you can see it for yourself. Here is the Discord server. What you want to do is, if you are interested in participating, is go down. You can see these are all the secret channels that nobody else can see. This is how many events we already have running as of last week. By the way, we started launching new events last Monday, and we're already up to 13. So let's go. This little robot is doing the Lord's work. What you want to go is to go to this Join a Pod channel right here, and you simply click on any of these buttons that you want to. These correspond to different time zones, EU, North America East, North America West, Asia, Oceania, and Global. These are different wait lists, and we launch events from each of those so that you are grouped with people who are generally in the same time zone as you. So if I'm like, oh, hey, I can play during like, you know, in normal afternoons, like, you know, after working hours and I'm like East Coast US, I could join North America East, and I will generally be paired with people who have around the same schedule so that it's easier for you to find games. However, it's not required that you join only with people from the same time zone. You can join any time zone, and sometimes I personally, for example, prefer playing in EU time zone because I tend to play a little earlier in the day than a lot of people in the North America East time zone, which is where I am actually located geographically. And the European Union time zone is a little bit better for me. You just click on that, and the robot will put you into a waitlist spot. We can see there's currently 22 other people on the waitlist. And when a new event launches, it will take the top 16 from that, and it will place them into an event. You'll get a little notification. You'll get a little private message that will tell you what to do. And then when you go into an event, I'm just going to jump into one of the ongoing events. There will be a post that has a best coast pairings link for you to submit your list and do all that stuff to finalize your registration. That's how you join events, and we run those constantly. It's 1 round per week. 4 weeks, so 1 month per event, and you can just play as many as you want. You obviously only have 1 entry into the waitlist at a time. However, once you're in an event, you've been pulled off the waitlist, and you can just join back in. So if I was to be added to an event, for example, I would just be able to come back in and click join, and I would be back on it as normal. So that is all the new updates that we did to the system. There previously was a system where you would like post and it would like track whether or not you posted in a waitlist for, recently or not or whatever. And it was like easy to get your registration lost and stuff like that. It was kind of a mess. This is hopefully much cleaner. Fingers crossed, assuming that the robot continues to work. That's what's going on. Can you click it again to leave the queue? Clicking it again shows your spot in the queue, but there is a command which is /leave will remove you from whatever waitlist you put in there. So there are a couple bot commands that you can use to manipulate your place on the waitlist. So if you want to see your spot in any channel, you can just click spot. Otherwise, you can click here and it will show me I'm already on in the waitlist. I'm in 23 or 24. Somebody joined after me apparently just now. And you can see all of your position on all the waitlists with /waitlists if you would like to. But that is what's going on. So it's very exciting and very cool. And I hope that this season will be bigger and cooler than last season. And I think already people are psyched because 11th edition seems like it's pretty wild. And we can sort of see that made manifest in the fact that the lists that have been submitted to this season's Invitational are pretty crazy. So let's talk about the cool ones. As a little bit of a PSA, folks, as well, I'm going to be live over on Twitch after this. I'm just going to be playing a game. I am in a couple of competitive events. Here's my Twitch. But I'm in a couple of competitive events, and I'll just be playing my games over on Twitch over there. But if you're looking for commentated games and live coverage, this channel is going to be your place to be for basically the foreseeable future, because I'm going to be streaming. I believe we have 2 games for the Invitational already scheduled tomorrow. And then I'll be at Ironweld starting Thursday, and I will be, I'll be live streaming that event all weekend. So it's going to be an insane amount of live coverage on this channel of Warhammer 40,000. But in any case, here are some lists. Let's hop in and discuss them. Now, first of all, there were a couple interesting trends. Not too surprising. We did see several people register as Thousand Suns. Unfortunately for everyone else, I guess they all got relegated to Group A. So Group A is just the Thousand Suns group. If you can beat Thousand Suns, you're going to be having a good time over there, I guess. I'm a T-Rex, who is currently #1 seed in the entire circuit. Ended up registering a Hexwarp Thrallband plus Sekitar cohort combo with Scarab Cult Terminators, a couple of Rubric Marines, a couple of Winged Demon Princes, 1 Defiler, which is interesting, but then a bunch of Sekitar robots and utility units. To be honest, not too surprising. I think this is probably, if not the #1 list of the edition so far, at least top 3. The Sekitar robot, the Sekitar cohort has such a natural amount of synergy alongside Hexwarp Thrallband that it's not surprising that we've seen this doing incredibly, incredibly well, which is cool. We also see something very similar over here from Rhina as well, running Hexwarp Thrallband and Sekitar cohort. Essentially the same combination of effects, a little bit of a different I guess, allocation of units. We have a 1 Demon Prince instead of 2. He has Arcane Might instead of being unupgraded. 2 Defilers and a Forge Friend, but then also banking it up with the Sekitar robot. So less of a focus on characters, more of a focus on heavier units like vehicles, but either case, both the same combinations. We also see a little bit of Tau Empire seeing some play here. Majunior, who is, he streams over his games over on Twitch. I think it's twitch.tv/Majunior03. So he may stream his games over there, either in addition to or instead of them streaming on my channel. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to talk to him about that. But he is playing Montcaw, pretty classic stuff. Running the big broadside battlesuit team with missile drones to get focus fire for +1 AP and blow people up. Doesn't have the Warshaper combo for a free stratagem in that, but still pretty effective. He does have Darkstrider to protect the backline, plus an Ethereal with Strike Swiftly. Obviously, all these characters are unattached. However, they are very good when unattached because they can hide themselves around different terrain features. So unlike previous editions where they would just get picked off by ranged attacks pretty easily, it's much more difficult to do that because they can actually be gone to ground behind terrain features, at least in the early game, and then you can use them as utility later on. We have three Pathfinder teams, Piranhas, Riptide Battlesuits, Stealth Battlesuits. Pretty classic stuff, I guess. I don't know. It's it certainly is a Montcaw list. We also have a little bit of Tau coming from Freakmans as well. This one also playing Montcaw. Now, what's interesting is that competitively, it seems like a lot of Tau are moving towards, in IRL play, are moving towards a focus on retaliation plus advanced acquisition cadre. However, these players, I think, are sticking with Montcaw, most likely because it is a personal preference. The retaliation plus advanced acquisition cadre is probably a little bit more flexible. The Montcaw game plan is kind of prescribed, like you have to alpha strike your opponent, and if you don't, you lose so much damage output going into the late game that it gets very difficult to compete with your opponent on an attritional basis. However, you do have that opportunity to just blast your opponent if you can get the lines of sight to them. I know that both Freak and my Junior have been playing this, or like various versions of Montcaw for ages. And so I think that it's probably the case that they feel very comfortable with it. And when you are into this group that is some, the strongest players of the circuit, and you're not going to get any layup games, right? There's no like round one, I get to play against, somebody who's new and I get to shake the rust off a little bit and I get to warm up. Your first game is going to be with someone who's doing incredibly well, right? Like already we can, these people are going to be paired into the top seeds in the entire game. So playing something that you are, or the entire circuit, playing something that you are very familiar with makes a lot of sense, even if it might not be necessarily the cutting edge of the meta. That said, it's still Riptide Battlesuits, it's still Stealth Battlesuits. It's a bunch of stuff that is very strong. So that is pretty cool. Those are the armies that I basically would have expected to see. Thousand Suns, Tau, probably two of the top 3 armies in the game. I would hazard a guess. What's interesting is the other armies that have started to show up. Now, I think, based on statistics from the last couple of weeks of competitive play, a bit of a surprise army has reared its ugly head from the bowels of the warp as potentially one of the strongest armies of the game, and especially an army with a ridiculous, like a dizzying array of build variety, and that is Chaos Demons, which I know I talked about Chaos Demons being very good when they talked about the psychic changes. I don't know if I was entirely prepared for the level of power that Gibbs Workshop was willing to give to Shadow Legion and to some of the specific demon, like the lesser demon subfactions, like the cult specific subfactions, like Plague Legion or Legion of Excess, which we saw do well over the course of the weekend. But that what that does do is it opens up just this like crazy array of different builds you can play. You can play Monster Mash in Demonic Incursion or in Scintillating Legion just fine. You can play a Cavalry Horde either in Blood Legion or in Legion of Excess or in Shadow Legion. They're focusing either on like Hellflayers, like we talked about this weekend if you watched my video this morning, or focusing on Blood Crushers in the case of Corn Demons, and you can also play just like massive hordes of demons, either very difficult to kill tanky hordes inside Shadow Legion plus Warp Tide, or you can do something similar in some of the cult specific detachments, like for example Plague Legion, where you take 1 million Plague Bearers. It's pretty wild. It feels like a Space Marine level of variety in this faction, and it's showcased by the fact that we have 2 demon players in the Invitational right now. The first one is Ralbin, who has a penchant for kind of weird and wild lists, which is always fun to see. This time he is playing Scintillating Legion plus Lords of the Warp. Lords of the Warp is explicitly there to unlock Purge the Foe as a disposition. I think Scintillating Legion has like it's priority assets or disruption or something. It's like kind of something that doesn't really make sense for Scintillating Legion as its baseline force disposition. However, as soon as you give it Purge, it goes crazy because suddenly it's just a bunch of greater demons who are teleporting around the table and shooting you. So it's like fits perfectly into Purge the Foe. We're taking Bellicor, so we can ignore turn 1 shooting. Very good if you are expecting to see a lot of things like Tau Empire in your group. We have a Winged Demon Prince with the Neverblade. That's the +1 to hit and plus attacks and plus strength enhancement for your melee demons. There's an interesting thing you can do with this, although it gets a little bit awkward because you end up running out of spots to put your enhancements. You physically like don't have enough characters to take all your enhancements on. But if you put Neverblade on, I guess what we could do is actually pull it up on the app. If you put Neverblade on a Lord of Change, it sounds pretty weird, but it makes them hit on 2s permanently because I believe all their melee weapons are psychic. At least their staff is psychic. I don't know if their sword is psychic. But in any case, even if they are degraded, no, just the staff is psychic. So if they're degraded, they would hit on 2s with their Staff of Tzeentch and 3s with their sword. Otherwise, if they're not degraded, it would be 2s and 2s. But the sword also benefits from the extra attacks. You can net an additional bonus attack from this, and it gives you Strength 9. This is Strength 9, AP2, 3 damage, I think, with the Neverblade. Strength buff. It's +2 strength, if I remember correctly, and +1 AP. So I guess AP3, I guess. So it makes the Lord of Change actually hit pretty hard. And if you are in a situation where you can start one Lord of Change in reserve and then like ingress it, you can construct this like disruption unit who can jump in and he can walk up and he can shoot a unit to death and he can charge and can kill another unit. And you can 2 for 1 and then put 5 OC on an objective. It's, I think, mostly funny, but obviously the Winged Demon Prince is good here as just a very or a relatively inexpensive kind of melee counterpunch that you can use to clear off your greater demons if your opponent's playing too aggressively in melee. We then have another Lord of Change with Infernal Puppeteer, so he's going to be able to project his spells through the line of sight of another unit. And then the last one is a Lord of Change with Improbable Shield, which is maybe the most important enhancement on in the detachment. We also have one with Inescapable Eye, which gives you additional flux tokens. The tough part about this detachment is that all of these enhancements are absolutely money. Insanely money. Infernal Puppeteer gives you range and targetability on your guns. Neverblade makes you hit hard in melee. Inescapable Eye supports the detachment mechanic, which is the flux token mechanic that these guys have. And Improbable Shield gives you a 4+ Feel No Pain in a 6-inch aura against both psychic attacks and mortal wounds. And given how incredibly prevalent psychic attacks are in general, this is incredibly strong, right? We're talking about Grey Knights, we're talking about other Chaos Demons, we're talking about Librarius Conclave, and Librarius Conclave also has this additional thing where, depending on the build, a lot of times it's focusing even its non-psychic attacks on mortal wound output, where, you know, you're taking Immolator combo, you're taking Fusillade combo, and you're trying to pump as many devastating wounds into people, and Improbable Shield protects you from all of that. So as a metagame choice, it's absolutely insane. We then also have a bunch of Screamers and, interestingly, a Soul Grinder, which I think is cool. The Soul Grinder is, I don't know necessarily what it's doing here. It has a pretty good gun if you're playing Tzeentch Demons. That's like an AP2 las cannon, effectively, which is pretty nice to have. But the Soul Grinder is also just like a real annoying to kill unit. He's just super tough to destroy for his points value, where he's 14 wounds to the 4+, Feel No Pain. He can be protected by Bellicor, all that stuff. And he's another, you know, relatively effective melee piece who can take 2 melee weapons, and you can buff with Pyrogenesis and melee as well, so they can hit pretty hard. I having played them a lot last edition, I actually think I've come around quite a bit on the Soul Grinder simply as a stat block to just like sit around and be obnoxious. It feels like it should be a meme, but I think it's significantly less memey than it was previously. So Scintillating Legion, I don't know. I would say it's relatively standard, but it is, I think, the like perfect demon monster mash. The other benefit of the Soul Grinder is that he's relatively like he retains their low unit count. So when you're playing Purge and you're in a Mara match or something and you're trying to get kill more, it's much more difficult if they're trying to push through like 14 wound greater demons rather than small units of infantry, which your army basically didn't bring. That said, one of the other builds that we can see is something that is relatively similar, but focused very much more heavily on offensive melee. Not quite seeing the magic. It doesn't do too much damage, but that's not really why you're bringing it, to be fair. I guess we can pull up its datasheet real quick. Actually, it's interesting. I don't think they got mobile, which I feel like they maybe should have. That would have helped quite a bit. I do think that there is a little bit of a downside with these guys and maneuvering around light terrain features, especially light terrain features that are on the terrain templates in the 11th edition maps do restrict movement a lot for big monsters and vehicles that can't stand on top of them. So having a huge base doesn't necessarily make it more difficult for you to move around terrain, because that's actually, if anything, a little bit easier than it was previously, because the terrain features are generally smaller. However, there's more of them, which makes like maneuvering around them very difficult. However, he does Deep Strike because he's a demon, and then just like T11, 14 wounds, 4+ invulnerable save is a lot, right? It's a lot to get through. He absorbs a lot of real estate. Your opponent does have to kill him if they just let him do his thing. He is gonna, attrition them down. He's gonna do appreciable damage, and I don't know. I think if the idea of the list is that you are already pushing towards this low model count stat block, where you're trying to basically take as many massive high toughness 4+ invuln saves as possible, you could choose to take like more screamers or something, but the Soul Grinder is going to fit into that archetype a lot more easily. Yeah, also OC5 is very reasonable. But he's taking, it's the Warp Gaze. It gets +1 strength from Lords of Change nearby. So he shoots his Harvester Cannon at strength 11, and his Warp Gaze is strength 13, which are pretty relevant breakpoints. It's not the craziest amount of shooting of all time, but it is like, it's not unreasonable. And then he hits pretty hard at melee. I don't remember what we are taking as a profile for these guys. It ends up being an Iron Claw and a Warp Claw. So that is the 5 attack, strength 16, AP 3d6 plus 2 damage, plus the Warp Claw is the 6 attack, 2 damage weapon. And there is the Pyrogenesis strat inside this detachment can affect your melee attacks. So you can push this up to strength 19 if you really feel like you need it. And you can push the Warp Claw up to strength 11 and then AP 4 and AP 2 respectively. So you can, if you have the flex tokens and the command points to pump it, you can make this guy hit actually pretty hard in melee, which is always nice to see. The Gaze has Blast. Oh, does it? It is D3 shots, I guess. That does make sense, yeah. I guess that's fair. Yeah, there's a lot of like 10-man Terminator squads running around, and just being able to like put 5 shots into them potentially is pretty good. Especially with like the fact that it was AP2 last edition was pretty brutal. However, it being AP2 nowadays goes a lot longer, so that feels pretty good. So I don't know. I think it makes sense. I do want to talk about the other Chaos Demon list, however. Ricochet from Team Xenotech is playing Chaos Demons. He's also playing a bunch of Lords of Change, but we are doing it in Shadow Legion as opposed to Scintillating Legion. So the Lords of Change don't do as much damage. However, the army in general is much more difficult to kill. And he's taking a lot of like similar units. He has 1 big melee beatstick. It's a Fates of Darkness Bloodthirster. In addition to 3 Lords of Change, these guys get a permanent -1 to be hit effect from the Shadow Legion detachment ability. So while they don't do as much damage, they will just tank for longer than they do in Scintillating Legion. They don't have like the access to the bonus strength though, which is a big downside. However, we can offset that with all these blood crushers. So we're playing Purge the Foe. We're taking a bunch of blood crushers with soul shattering charge, which gives you a 3-inch engagement range on the when you charge, which means it's easier to get more blood crushers into fight your opponent, despite the fact that they are relatively large bases that are non-mobile and have a tough time getting around terrain features. So getting that 3-inch engagement allows you to essentially double rank the unit, so you can get most of the blood crushers into fight your target. However, they also do, on average, 1 mortal wound per blood crusher on the charge. So you're averaging 6 mortal wounds on impact attacks from each of these units, and potentially 7 from the version with the Skullmaster. Now, the Skullmaster's unit has eschewed soul shattering charge, so they don't have the expanded engagement range. However, he is taking leaping shadows, so he gets a 9-inch scout move. So he's able to move up at the start of the game and then advance and charge because he's in Shadow Legion and potentially blow something up immediately as soon as the game begins. You're going to follow that up with 3 Lords of Change that can clear out space to then rapid ingress more blood crushers and continuously do that. And the threat range of these guys is very long because of that passive advance and charge. And then they also get fall back and charge thanks to Cavalcade of Chaos. So this list, I think, has been doing the rounds quite a bit. I don't think this is like the first time we've seen this or anything. I think Nick Nadavati played something very similar at ATC last week, which was pretty cool to see. I think it's a very interesting build. It does feel a little high variance, like we are just throwing Lords of Change at people with no rerolls and hoping for the best. And the Bloodthirster, of course, without any support, is like, who knows what he's going to do? Is he going to table your opponent by himself by just constantly killing people and going into reserve? Or is he going to fail and then immediately die? No one knows. We have no idea. He does have advance and charge, though, so in some cases you can use him as like kind of a attrition piece, where all he does is he runs in and he kills like 5 utility models and then leaves, because he can do that very consistently. As long as he doesn't just like flub his sweep attack, he's probably doing okay. Which I think is probably the game plan. That allows you to kill those units without having to expose the Lords of Change, because you don't have Bellicor, so you can't like range screen anything that's coming back into you. All right, that's Chaos Demons talked about. Let's talk about Demon Hunters, because I think the most commonly submitted faction here ends up being Grey Knights. We do have like a pretty wide, like a pretty hefty, I guess, community of Grey Knight players just in general inside the online community. I'm not really sure why that is, but it definitely is the case. And Group D seems like it's sort of like Grey Knight Central. Basically, the Grey Knights have to fight their way through a bunch of demons so that they can finally get to fight the Thousand Suns in Group A when we get to the final stage. It's gonna be how things go. So we can push through these Grey Knights real quick. Enba over here is running a combination of Brotherhood Strike and Fires of Purgation. So Brotherhood Strike is it's the detachment gives you bonuses when you set up from reserve, I do believe. I know Enba has had a really good track record of playing kind of off-the-wall Grey Knight builds. He actually participated in last year's Invitational with a really weird, like, Terminator, like, shooty brick build, which was very off-meta at the time, and actually did pretty well. Yeah, so you reroll 1s to hit and wound when you arrive from Deep Strike, which you're going to get pretty consistently thanks to Gate of Infinity, of course. And then we're also taking Fires of Purgation, so we can battle shock people with the Purgation squads, and we get all those crazy enhancements and stratagems that can supercharge our Purgation squads. So we're able to play this like kind of kitey, long range or mid range shooting list with without having to worry about the things that we get from Warpbane, right? So without having to worry about, well, first of all, we get 2 detachments, which is big, but we don't have to worry about zone control in order to get at least some rerolls on the table, which is pretty nice. Grey Knight players are online, so they don't have to purchase baby carriers. That's so true. I have one, and he's 3D printed, and I played 1 game with him, and then I never again. I'm so excited that like Terminator Grey Knights are good now, because I have a million Terminators and Strike Marines, and I might be able to play Grey Knights again. But I had a great time playing Grey Knights back in 8th edition. It was insane. 3 editions ago nowadays, though. Whew. So we have Castle and Crow with the Purifier Squad. Pretty classic inclusion here. These guys are taking all Psy Cannons plus their Purifying Flame. We do have 3 Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knights. So just some decent anti-tank shooting alongside those rerolls, which is very helpful. One of them has Tome of Forbidden Ways, which is going to give him +1 to Gate of Infinity, your Gate of Infinity selections. So I think you could pick up 4 units instead of 3 is what that means. It should be noted, though, that there is a very specific or a new interaction with reserve effects in 11th edition versus 10th. In 10th edition, if you began the game on the table, you were not subject to reserve restrictions. So there was like rules that said, you cannot arrive in the first battle round if you are in reserves, for example. And if you started on the battlefield and picked up and then dropped, you were immune to those because you were already deployed, so you were not a reserve by definition. In 11th edition, that's not the case. The rule is simply that a unit cannot make an ingress move in the first battle round. The only way around that is if you have a ability that allows you to arrive with an explicit timing, or if you have like something that says you count it as the second battle round. But if you have something that's like you arrive in your movement phase next turn, for example, you would be able to bypass that because there's no other legal time for you to come in. You can't hold that unit in reserve. It's illegal. So like a Calidus Assassin, for example, it picks up at the end of the fight phase and then drops immediately back down on the next turn. Demonic Incursion also has a stratagem that picks units back up and then immediately drops back down in the movement phase. That is essentially the only way you can ingress in turn 1. So all these Grey Knight lists we have to consider, none of these are going to be able to do the thing they did last edition, where at the top of 1, if they go second, they pick up all their Grey Knights, and then bottom of 1, they drop them all in. Because Gate of Infinity says you go into Strat Reserve, you don't have a legal way to arrive until Battle Round 2. That's very important to keep in mind. So pretty neat. We've also got a Brotherhood Terminator squad, a pair of strike squads for some objective secure, as well as a purgation squad with Boons of Deimos. That is the +2 strength enhancement. It is, yeah. +2 strength, and then we can use a stratagem, I think, inside Purgation Force. To give them additional attacks, is that right? We give them devastating and sustained, yeah. So we can take a unit of 10 with +2 strength. We can drop them 12 inches away from something. We're firing 4 silencers, which are correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that they are 6 shots each. Is that right? Yeah, 6 shots to strength 5. Devastating wounds. So we're firing already, it's 4 silencers, so it's 24 shots. And then we have another 6 Grey Knights with 4 shot Stormbolters, so 24 additional shots. So we're firing 48 shots. It's all between strength 6 and strength 7. Sustained, devastating, reroll 1s to hit, and reroll 1s to wound. So the damage from this unit is pretty extreme. It is only 1 damage, AP 0. So it's leaning very heavily on that devastating wounds to get work done, but it is pretty frightening. We then have 2 units with side cannons that can kind of bounce around and clear out utility squads at a longer distance. So very cool build coming from Enba here, but certainly not the only variety of Grey Knights that we see in the event. We also see, and I believe that 2 different players, I'm going to fact check myself here, 2 different players, both Telly and Feather. Oh, no, actually, they all have slightly different detachment combinations, excuse me. So Feather over here is another sort of Grey Knight extraordinaire, is playing a combination of Argent Assault with Banishers. So Argent Assault is a detachment where your paladins get +1 to wound if they attack something that has a toughness higher than their strength characteristic. So they're strength 6, they go in at anything T7 or higher, and they are wounding on 4s rather than 5s. They wound T12 on 5s rather than 6s. Huge deal for paladins who have a tough time converting into heavy armor, but each time they do, it's AP2 3 damage. So it's pretty spooky when they actually get through. Banishers gives you either sustained or lethal hits on when you activate in melee on a leadership check. It's like a kind of a weird version of Dark Pacts, but for melee attacks coming out of this detachment. You also have I believe that Banishers keeps access to, it's now called Shadow of Anarch. It used to be the infamous Mists of Deimos. If anyone remembers Index 10th edition, this stratagem was a nightmare. It was in the discussion for certainly the best reactive stratagem in the game, potentially one of the best stratagems in the game. At least probably like the top 5 non-core stratagems for sure. Core stratagems are pretty important, new orders and command reroll and all that kind of stuff. But for stratagems inside detachments, holy crap. The weird thing about this is also that it has not been eroded for distance. So, while most reactive effects, so that they work when enemies end a movement within 8 inches of you, this one says 9. So, for whatever reason, it can trigger at a longer distance than any other reactive move in the game. Or not literally any other, but most other reactive moves in the game. There are a couple of other examples of 9-inch triggering reactive moves elsewhere. But spooky. It's a spooky, very spooky stratagem. And the downside is that it got put into this detachment that nobody really wanted to play because you're playing Grey Knight melee, which is like sort of middling at best, until they gave you +1 to wound at all your paladins. So now you have these paladin squads that can like drop in or rapid ingress, move up, shoot a million side cannons into something, then charge. You come back in to countercharge them, and they shadow of the Anarch away, and then rapid ingress back and cycle the whole thing back through. So if you are not prepared to play against this specific stratagem right here, this detachment is going to absolutely mince you. It's going to tear you apart, especially because it's able to play Purge the Foe. So we're going to be focusing very heavily on getting kills with those paladin squads rather than performing actions and doing stuff like that. So we're very incentivized to play these smaller units that are these lower unit counts, these like lower counts of big punchy spooky units. In this case specifically, we have a Brotherhood Chaplain with Psychic Celerity. I believe that is an enhancement inside the Argent Assault, which gives you charge reroll. Is that right? +1 to charge. Excuse me. It gives you a bonus to charge. Anyway, the Brotherhood Chaplain gives you charge reroll built in, so out of reserve you can be making an 8-inch charge with a reroll, which is like a good. It's somewhere around a coin flip. It also gives you very good heroic interventions because this is just charge rolls. So your heroic interventions are at +1, and the Brotherhood Chaplain gives you rerolls on them, so it's all pretty good. Plus, the Brotherhood Chaplain can unbattle shock people, which is very good if your army is only composed of a couple of models. So being able to, pick units to not be battle shocked is pretty big when you only have a few units that are actually scoring you primaries. We have Castle Crow with a big Purifier squad, pretty classic with a bunch of side cannons. We have Grandmaster Voldus in another Paladin squad. He can stack his -1 to be hit alongside cover, so you can potentially be -2 to hit. The other thing is that Voldus affects all attacks. It's not explicitly ranged attacks for his ability, so it's each time an attack targets the unit, so it's like uber cover, essentially, uber stealth on his Paladin squad. Plus, he hits pretty hard. He does a bunch of mortal wounds. He's never like bad to have around. We've got 3 strike squads for utility plus an interceptor squad for another fast mover as well, which is pretty neat. Cool to see Terminators back in into the limelight here for the Terminator faction that has not played Terminators for a million years. It's pretty cool. All right. Lastly, we have, so that list is kind of focused on dealing damage, right? We have Banishers for sustained or lethal, plus Argent Assault for +1 to wound. You're going to stick all those together, and you're going to do some pretty serious damage with it. However, we can play a little bit more of a tricksy version of the army. We don't have Shadow of the Anarch, but we do have some other things to go with it. And this is a very similar list from Telly, who's playing a combination of Argent Assault and Hallowed Conclave. Now, one thing I want to point out right now is that all these lists have run Purge the Foe. We haven't run into a single non-Purge the Foe list. Now, not to say that they aren't all Purge the Foe, but Purge the Foe is definitely the overarching theme of the event so far. A lot of people go to purge their opponents. So In this case, Hallowed Conclave is a pretty interesting one. It gives your Terminators fallback, shoot, and charge. So unlike the other detachment, where we're going to be focusing on that reactive move to try to keep ourselves sort of cycling into your opponent's face, in this case, we just have the ability to do that naturally. I'm going to be honest, I haven't really had a lot of experience with this detachment, because this is one of the ones that everyone just sort of laughed at when it initially came out. But now that you can affect Paladins with it, and Paladins have +1 to wound and melee, it immediately recontextualizes the entire detachment, right? So we can get +1 attack for Grey Knight Terminators. I believe that's also affects Paladins as well, because they are both Grey Knight and Terminator keyworded, but I'm going to fact check myself on that. It is the case that they are Terminator and Grey Knight keyworded. It's not, I think it would be Brotherhood Terminator Squad, I believe is the actual name of the Terminator, the battle line Terminator unit inside Grey Knights, and that's what it would have to reference if it didn't want to reference Paladins. This is detachments. We want data sheets. It is Brotherhood Terminator Squad is the name of the actual unit. So, because it references any Terminator, you can put it on Paladins and characters and stuff like that. Pretty good stuff. We also have a Fight on Death. There are some interesting things going on with Fight on Death right now. Fight on Death can allow you to beat a lot of other melee armies by messing up their overrun fights. Feels a little weird, but that is indeed how it works. Basically, if you fight on death, your unit remains in play until such time as it has fought. It does not resolve its attacks immediately. It resolves its attacks at a future time when its unit is selected to fight. The weird thing about that is that in some cases, this can make it so if your opponent is trying to set up a play whereby they, for example, attack one unit, then overrun into a second unit, and you go, I will fight on death. And this works in any infantry squad, so it can work on Strike Marines or Interceptors or whatever. Your unit remains until you select it, which means it will probably be there until the end of the fight phase. So if they're trying to overrun, you could be like, no. You can't overrun. You're engaged with my guys. You can't damage them. They can't be allocated attacks or suffer any additional damage. However, you are engaged with them, which means that you can only pile and consolidate towards them. You can't gain additional pile and consolidates for being selected to fight. It's maybe a bit of an oversight, in my opinion. I don't know if they intended the rules to work that way. However, that is explicitly what they wrote in the rulebook, which is pretty weird. So immediately having a fight on death on in your detachment somewhere is immediately pretty good. We have some mortal wounds application. We also have there is a D6 reactive move. It's not even close to being Shadow of Anarch, but it's okay. As well as a -1 to be wounded on Grey Knight's infantry in the opponent's shooting phase for high strength attacks. Pretty good, like just a baseline strong set of stratagems inside a detachment that's already benefiting the things that you want it to benefit with. So it's like kind of just a toolboxy detachment in general. On the Grey Knight Paladins of old, it was a laughing stock because Paladins were silly, but now that Paladins can kill God, it's actually sweet. So that's pretty cool. What are we taking here? We've got a Brotherhood Librarian plus a big Paladin squad, another Brotherhood Librarian plus another a big Brotherhood Terminator squad. We have a Grand Master in another Paladin squad, plus 2 Strike Squads and an Interceptor squad for utility. And that's the whole list. It's 33 Terminators and a couple of Strike Marines. And we're playing Purge the Foe. Classic stuff. Is it also 9 inches? Oh my god, Chet. Oh my god. I swear, whichever intern they told to go through and do updates for the new mechanics, definitely forgot to do the different factions, right? Because Eldar and Necrons didn't get frame keywords, and Grey Knights apparently didn't get any reactive move updates. What the fuck? What gives? So a couple different Grey Knight builds, which is very interesting. We also have some other cool stuff going down. I would be remiss, I think, if I didn't talk about Ash. Ash is, I think, has participated in every single T5 Invitational for the entire length of the circuit so far, which is wild. And she is playing a combination of Army of Faith with Sanctified Orators. I know there's a lot of people playing Hallowed Martyrs so that they can get access to priority assets. Ash has said, no. I'm going to shoot you to death and then play Take and Hold, which seems pretty reasonable to me. Army of Faith gives you 2 acts of faith per phase instead of 1. That's fine. I mean, it's kind of whatever of a detachment ability and outside of some very specific situations. However, what it does let you do is get access to a bunch of really good strats. That includes things like Divine Guidance, which gives you +1 AP on your attacks, and you can gain yourself Miracle Dice back. It gives you Light of the Emperor, which ignores profile characteristic modifiers, which affects things like your top line profiles. So you ignore stuff like -1 toughness from a contagion, or importantly, -1 OC replacement due to battle shock. Okay, sure. We just ignore those. Get the fuck out of here. It also importantly lets you ignore hit rolls, roll or test modifiers, as well as weapon skill, ballistic skill characteristic modifiers, which is pretty cool. That lets you shoot through cover and any stacked defensive effect. So if we're talking about things like the Chaos Demons that we talked about earlier, with a bunch of Lords of Change who are -1 to be hit in cover, so -1 ballistic skill as well, you pay 1 command point, you target an Adeptus Sororitas jump pack unit with this, and I think generally speaking, we do have a bunch of Zephyrim units in the backline here. We are playing, looks like a Zephyrim squad. 1 Zephyrim squad with a jump cannoness. You can project it as a 3-inch aura, and you can affect all of your units with it, or all your units in a particular area as well. So, pretty good stuff. We're going to be using that on... go back to the top of the list. Unfortunately, got spaced out really weird. Should probably fix that. Morven Vol in a Paragon Warsuit squad. We are running Heavy Bolters of the Paragon Warsuits with full rerolls, of course. Extremely strong these days, especially with ignore modifiers. So they're just... probably like 2s into 5s or 4s into most units with full rerolls, which is pretty spooky. We have the Triumph of King Catherine plus a Hospitaller because it's a support into a Battle Sister squad, so we have a big beefy unit that can regenerate. We have a Jump Pack Cannoness in the Zephyrim squad to give us access to our jump packs, an Arco-Flagellant unit, 1 Castigator unit with Heavy Bolters and Castigator autocannons, so we can push all of our Heavy Bolters to AP2. Pretty spooky. We have a bunch of Celestian Incendents. These guys have devastating wounds and anti-psyker on their melee attacks, which means they're very good into a lot of very classic army compositions right now. Scintillating Legion, Grey Knights, any of the Librarius Conclave builds. Celestian Incendents basically have the silver bullet for them, pun intended, I guess, where they can come in and they can just throw a bunch of devastating wounds into a Psyker and potentially just knock them out immediately so they don't have to deal with their buffs anymore. An Exorcist, as well as a pair of Mortifiers with Heavy Bolters and a Sanctifier unit for early game aggression, which is sweet. Oh, it's 2 Castigators? Is it 2 Castigators? Oh, I see. It's got sandwiched in with the Arco-Flagellants. I see what's going on. Yes, it is. Yeah, that's fair enough. I don't know what's going on with our probably from the private messages the list this came in. They were a little bit messed up. Excited to see some Adeptus Sororitas sort of on the competitive tables these days, because it does feel like they are getting pushed aside pretty hard by some of the other factions that are kind of at the top of the game. All right. We have a couple more factions to discuss and a couple of interesting ones. We have Adeptus Custodes being played by Min-Max, running a combination of Shield Host plus Tyrannotoi Hammer Blow. That's the Terminator detachment that gives you... It's, I believe it's reroll charges when you ingress. It is indeed exactly that. Let's go. So we can be throwing just a bunch of like rerolling 9-inch charges out of reserve. Those units are also extra effective because Shield House gives them 5+ criticals for sustained hits, and they get mostly wound rerolls against like the entire game. The actual Alaris Custodian data sheet got this massive glow up because this ability is basically just you reroll wound rolls. Because the new character attachment rules prevent you from splitting characters from units, and the way that the game is designed is so beneficial to attached characters. In a lot of cases, you can look at a list and every unit has a character in it. If you're either a vehicle, you're a single entity vehicle, or you're like 5 idiots who you don't care about, right? They're going to kill them anyway. Or you always have a character. Like speaking as a Tyrion player, I think my entire Tyrion army has characters attached besides like the Lictors and the Biovore, I guess. As we just talked about, there's like all these Grey Knight armies where all the Grey Knights are just big units of dudes with characters in them. The same goes for like Liberius Conclave Space Marines, and Greater Demons are all characters. So this ability is really good. Really, really, really good. We're taking a Dawn Eagle Jetbike Shield Captain with Panopta spec, so his unit gets ignore cover. We have a Custodian Guard Squad plus 2 Alaris Custodians, a Caladius Grav Tank, 2 Venatari Custodians, a Land Raider, so we can deliver some of those guys to the battlefield. That's probably where the shield, the Custodian Guard Squad is coming from. I would hazard a guess. We then have a Virtus Praetor unit. I believe that he has noted that it's attached into the Virtus Praetor squad with the Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle Jetbike. So they're going to be able to get their reactive move at the end of the fight phase if they do successfully charge someone. 2 Witchseeker squads and a Navigator to hold down the back line. Basically the same reason that we were taking Dark Strider in some of our other, in some of the Tau lists. The Navigator's doing the same thing. He's not quite as, he doesn't have the same panache as Dark Strider. He's 15 points more expensive as well, but he can sit in the back and he can screen out Deep Strikers from taking your home objective while the rest of your army runs in the middle of the table to score Purge the Foe. The other benefit here is that what we can do is we can dump our Alaris Custodians in from reserve for a commander point. And then we can also bring all of our Venatari Custodians in. So depending on the situation, we can be rapid ingressing 3 units in the same turn. And you already have like good, it's pretty solid shooting and skirmishing from the early game with the Witchseekers and the vehicles and the bikers. And so being able to construct a situation with that big Land Raider in the center of the battlefield that's threatening a lot of the midboard can force your opponent in, and then you drop a bunch of reserves, and then you just like counterpunch them really, really hard. Pretty classic shield host fare. It's kind of cool to see a bunch of different shield host builds being, very useful, because it does feel like, I think to some extent, a lot of the Custodes builds these days have been multiple Virtus Praetors inside lines of the Emperor to shoot well. However, shield host is there. It has good force dispositions, and it's also just a massively high damage, just insane damage output from sustained hits to full reroll units on Custodian Guard squads or Alaris Custodian squads that are in many cases getting all those wind rerolls. So you're just like good into basically such a variety of targets. We can just be swinging 1 million attacks into infantry, or we can come in and we can use those rerolls on larger units like vehicles and stuff and kill them. Pretty neat stuff. We're also running a little bit of Chaos Space Marines as well. I'm excited to watch the next player we're about to talk about, because he is not a faction specialist. No. Sin Kane, our main man over here, could not be. Oh, he could not only relegate himself to a single faction. He must, in fact, play only a single detachment. This man is, I don't think it's controversial at all to say that he is the strongest Fellhammer Siege Host player in the entire world. This man has hundreds of games with explicitly varieties of Fellhammer Siege Host. He's crazy good at this explicit detachment. In this case, he's also comboing it with Cabal of Chaos, which is the new Psyker detachment. It gives your Psyker units +1 strength when they are selected to shoot, and your Demon Princes can buff themselves to do some additional damage as well. Now, Fellhammer Siege Host is incredibly strong because it it is able to play into a lot of factions that are going to focus heavily on getting kills in order to score their primary consistently, because this detachment just wants to take massive bricks of idiots and make them obnoxious enough to kill that it is unlikely you will lose them in one single attack, and thus you get to sort of gain value from them and force your opponent into you so you can counterpunch them, and then use just like the passive solid damage output the Chaos Space Marines have to do some pretty serious damage. So we're playing Abaddon the Despoiler plus 5 Chosen, so he gets advance and charge. We have Kravik Morn inside a Terminator squad. 10 Terminators with Kravik Morn. Previously, I think this was a Bastion Plate guy, but I guess we're just taking Kravik Morn instead because his damage output's really good, I suppose. We have Huron Blackheart plus Master of the Maelstrom plus Chosen, so another big unit. All these can be -1 to be wounded, thanks to Fellhammer Siege Host. All of them have access to a 5+ Feel No Pain, thanks to Fellhammer Siege Host, so you're -1 to wound from high strength characteristic attacks. And you also have in your opponent's shooting phase, I believe, Steadfast Determination, which gives you a 5+ Feel No Pain. So if your opponent is trying to shoot these units down, they are not going to go down in a single activation. The Masters of the Maelstrom also have passive regeneration back to their unit as well. We then have chosen for him to go into Vashtor the Archifane, who's a very good rapid ingress threat, because he can drop in next to a vehicle and be totally unshootable, so you can't interact with him. He doesn't have hidden or anything. He just stands next to a demon engine and gains lone operative, so it's difficult to engage with him. And then in order to facilitate that, we have a Defiler plus a single Warpsmith. Wild, dude. The Huron Brick is 515 points. Yeah, it is 16 models, to be fair. 515 points plus Huron, Master of the Maelstrom, or I guess is Master 6 models? Enforcer, Captain Sargoda, Qatar Garrix, Garland Soul Eater, Gary and the Corpse Master. Yeah, it's 5 models. So it's 16 in total. They have a reactive move. In addition to regeneration, in addition to a bunch of like idiots that they can pass wounds off to, because you get like the Enforcer, for example, and Captain Sargoda, who you don't really care about once you've deployed on the battlefield. Plus they do mortal wounds when they move. Plus, you know, Huron's just kind of a beast as well. Insane unit. Plus they advance and charge. So it's all these massive units. Like you can basically just place 2 10-man Chosen bricks on the line and say, go. What are you going to do? I'm hidden turn 1. You have to get up close and personal to attack me, and I advance and charge. So I'm just going to be in threat range if you come up to engage with me. You can't kill the unit, and then I'm going to come back in, and I'm going to rapid ingress his Terminator brick, and I'm going to put all 3 units into you on the subsequent turn, and you're just going to lose immediately. You're just going to take, your whole front line is just going to evaporate, and you have to deal with 30, almost 40 models sitting in your opponent's face and having, you know, just hanging out there. I guess it's not quite that many because Abaddon's only a 5-man. He's not a 10. But it's still like 22 models basically on the line plus a Defiler. And then these guys just hang out in reserve, and then you just drop them in front of somebody later. You can either be in hidden or gone to ground, or in a position where your opponent just can't put enough attacks into them to kill them, because like you're still -1 to be wounded and all that stuff on the Terminator squad too. So even if you take a little bit of damage on the Terminators, you're going to lose a Stormbolter guy or 2 maybe. Doesn't really matter. You just make it easy charge the next turn, and this unit's in, and now Kravik Morn just gets to beat people to death. Pretty spooky. Also, because your opponent doesn't auto-discard Grievous Blow. Oh, that's so true. Absolutely incredible. Yeah, that is very true. All right. I think we have one more that I think I'd like to talk about here. And that is going to be... Let's talk about some Adeptus Mechanicus. I feel like Adeptus Mechanicus has gone under the radar, and then I have to hop out and go to my game, which I'll be live streaming over on the Twitchies. But I feel like Adeptus Mechanicus has gone under the radar quite a bit recently, and I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they work in this new edition. A Darren over here, a faction specialist, an Adeptus Mechanicus maestro, a maestro of the machine, if you will. Over here, we're playing an interesting combination of Cohort Cybernetica and Lords of the Forge. So Cohort Cybernetica gives you +2 movement on your Cybernetica cohort units, which, if I'm going to be honest with you, chat, I actually don't know what has that that keyword. Is that robots? Are we doing robots? It must be, right? It is, yes. So, that affects explicitly the Castellan robots. I don't think anything else has it, right? It's just those guys, but I guess we're not playing any. So, are we playing it for, how are the stratagems? Are the stratagems good in Cohort Cybernetica? Yes. We get +3 move, +1 to advance and charge. You can get 3+ ballistic skill and ignore cover, so you retain that 3+ ballistic skill, and then you target something within range of an objective marker that you pick. Machine Spirit Resurgence, reroll hit rolls. If your unit is below half strength, you reroll wound rolls on Adeptus Mechanicus vehicle units that are below starting strength. That is a little bit tougher to get to, because except for your like Iron Strider or your Onagers and Scorpius, I guess, because the Iron Striders have to lose a model, which is a little bit tough. Machine Superiority allows you to shoot in a turn in which you fell back and ignore all modifiers to characteristics and any roller test made. So you also gain ignore cover from that one as long as you use it in the command phase. You can give a unit both Conqueror and Protector Imperative, so both Heavy and Assault, and +1 Ballistic Skill and +1 AP, plus Benevolence of the Omniscience, which is a Feel No Pain for vehicles. I understand. I get it. I'm picking it up. We're also playing Take and Hold. The second detachment is Lords of the Forge, which has priority assets, but we are actually taking the Cohort Cybernetica, I guess, partially for its forced disposition as well. Although a lot of people would say that, I guess, priority assets is a very strong one. But I do think it requires a certain level of aggression in order to consistently take the objectives that you need. And it feels like if we are taking a lot of Onager Doom Crawlers and a lot of Scorpius Disintegrators, it might be a little bit more difficult to do that. So Take and Hold definitely makes a lot more sense if you're playing a little bit slower. So, but the Lords of the Forge also means that you can buff up those vehicles with Belisarius Call and Thulia Gold, both of which become very difficult to kill, right? They both get their Feel No Pain. You also get it on your Servitor Battleclades. So if we're taking a bunch of Servitor Battleclades for utility, the Tech Priest in the Servitor Battleclade is very difficult to remove because he also gets an invuln save and a Feel No Pain. So that one dude just becomes like kind of obnoxious to get rid of. And then you have a bunch of really, really solid utility stratagems for your vehicles. So it's just like this attrition engine. Wild. What a cool detachment combination. I think that's interesting. I think definitely I would have expected to see, something a little bit more banal, playing Adeptus Mechanicus, Xari Hunter Cohort or something with a bunch of Sicarians that were trying to play, recon and then play this like fast and flighty style of build. But in this case, we're just playing a bunch of vehicles and doing vehicle stuff with them. So we're running Belisarius Call, a Tech Priest engines here with Necromechanic, which I believe is the enhancement where you get to 0 out of damage result once per turn, right? Oh, we have somehow lost our place in my app here. Oops. Sorry, chat. I couldn't find the enhancement for whatever reason. Yeah, you can a vehicle model within 12 inches of the bearer. You can turn the damage characteristic to 0. 12 inches is a hell of a range on that ability. That's pretty crazy. Second Tech Priest engines here with TL409, which I think is the big gun right, enhancement. Plus Thulia Gold. Techno-Archaeologist inside a Skitarii Ranger unit. Do that times 2. We have 2 units of 2 Iron Strider Ballistari with Cognis autocannons, 1 Onager Dunecrawler, Cerberus Raider unit for early game utility, plus 2 Servitor Battleclades, and 2 Scorpius Disintegrators. What a sick list. That's really interesting. Very fun. Need to review all the dispositions. Don't know what all of them are, what they can do. Yeah, the interesting thing I think I've realized is that as the disposition, as like we've learned more about the dispositions and actually rating all of them, is that they kind of do what they say on the tin. If you're like, how could this disposition play? And it's take and hold. It's about taking objectives and then holding them. All right, well, fair enough. Priority assets is about like taking one objective and holding it. All right, okay. Disruption is mostly about disrupting what your opponent's doing. So it kind of plays like opposite of whatever the other disposition it's playing against is. So disruption is very mutable. Reconnaissance wants to like get into all the areas and scout things. And Purge the Foe just wants to kill you. So it's like, when you think about what your army might generally want to do, it's actually pretty easy to pick your force disposition out of the selection without considering very like explicit, very specific, compositions or whatever. I think it's pretty interesting. Purge will be a gatekeeper disposition. I think that is probably going to be the case. It does feel to me like it is they call it first order optimal, which means that if you are basically on your first cycle of game knowledge, it is the most powerful. But as soon as you essentially cycle through to the second order, which is countering the first order, it ends up being less powerful, right? It's less flexible. And I think that's definitely, you look at it on the table and you're like, oh, I get points for killing people. That's so easy. However, the other players who are, good at playing their dispositions and know what they need to do against a Purge player are going to be able to run circles around you. Not to say it's not consistent, but it is, I think, especially given the fact that it is going to be so widely played, people are going to have experience against it and they're going to know what to do. What's interesting is that I believe, and we can actually take a quick peek here momentarily, is that I think Stat Check had a series of stats about their about disposition win rates, and the win rate was shockingly close. It actually sort of surprised me. Now I think that the real kicker is going to be like where you like whether those are good, what's good against other things, right? If I maintain a 50% win rate against specific other dispositions, that's where like the weirdness comes in. However, it's like everything's within like a percentage of each other. That's wild. That's pretty crazy. And because these are, dispositions are going to be somewhere around 20% of the metagame, right? I think the representation's a little bit different, right? The Purge the Foe gets wildly overrepresented, Take and Hold gets overrepresented, Disruption gets underrepresented. So that does skew things quite a bit. I think that does push Purge the Foe down quite a bit in terms of its win rate. But it is the case that's, that sample size is pretty large, right? So regardless of, I guess, like Reconnaissance and Disruption are pretty small, in any case, we can expect that those numbers are fairly reliable because we are going to start looking at so many players. You get a couple of weeks in and suddenly we're looking at tens of thousands of game results. And I don't know. It feels like if that trend maintains, it's going to be huge. Is Purge the most hated one? I think everyone kind of sighs at it at this point. I think you're like, oh, cool, you're playing Purge. Cool, I'm sick, dude. What a fun game plan. Take low unit counts. Do murder. Sweet. In any case, chat, I'm going to get over to my game. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with me today and watching the T5S2 Invitational. I'm going to push you over, as soon as this live stream's over, to the listing for tomorrow's live stream. We have 2 games scheduled. They're around at the same time. So what I might try to do is, if I do have the opportunity to attempt it, is to dual stream both of them. I know the last time I did that, I had a little bit of tough time doing it, and I fucked some stuff up. I'm gonna try to do a dry run tomorrow morning and make sure I can do it. But I can set up on my second computer a restream of the second game. It probably won't be commentated. However, at the very least, I can have the game recorded. So yeah, I guess worst case scenario, I can just record the game and upload it later, probably to TacticalTortoise TV. So I think that's going to be it. But please come hang out with me over on Twitch if you are not there already. And yeah, I'll be seeing you. Thanks everyone for hanging out with me today. Here's my Twitch link. In case you forgot. Keep it classy, folks. Have happy wargaming and enjoy the T5S2 Invitational. And good luck to all the players, because you're going to need it. This lineup's rough. Cheers, everybody.